So we've seen the world's youngest prime minister from Finland make a very bold suggestion. One we in the workforce love as employees, that should we cut down the number of working days in a week to 4? And she's also talking about 6 hours a day. The idea being happier people are more productive people. Secondly, it also addresses the whole issue of environment, reduces carbon credit, lesser number of people going to work, lesser electricity being used by corporations, and all of that. So we on Startup Central thought it's a good discussion to have. Is it actually correct to have lesser hours so you can be more productive and therefore you punch in more every day as opposed to just going to work for the sake of going to work, because that's what our managers and our HR departments would like us to do. But is it also more productive? And for all you young founders out there who treat your startups like babies that you can't detach from, should you be doing so? Should you be on calls 24/7? I'm going to be discussing that and a lot more today with Marcus. He is the India head for Thrive Global. Thrive Global, of course, has been set up by Arianna Huffington. Remember, she sold off Huffington Post. She had a breakdown, which she's very, very vociferous about, and now advocates a more balanced lifestyle. Marcus, welcome to Startup Central. Thanks so much for joining us here. The question I want to begin first by asking you is, I love the idea of a 4-day working week. I'll, of course, want the same salary, if not a raise, for the good work I've done in 2019. But, you know, where do you stand on this whole issue? You guys have a lot of scientific data on happier people being more productive at work.
Yeah, absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for having me on the show today. I think it's so fascinating. We're starting a new decade, a new period of time for all of us, and it's exciting to see these type of conversations now bubbling up into the working paradigm. You know, you're absolutely right. There is this often miscalculated thought that the amount or the output that an individual produces during his or her working week is directly related to the number of hours that they work. And we know that's just not true. The output is obviously a function of a person's productivity. And like so many things, the more that one has to spend time doing something, ultimately productivity then also begins to weigh in the more number of hours that a person works. So these are two different aspects. By focusing on enhancing an individual's productivity, we've seen so often that the overall output that an individual produces therefore just goes up.
You know, and the thing is that it's being tried out. For example, in Japan, we saw Microsoft attempt a 4-day week, and the results did show that they are more productive, which then leads me to the other question that considering the corporations and MNCs and companies that are so obsessive about their bottom line and about their EBITDA, why aren't they doing it?
Yeah, it's incredible. And it's just not Microsoft. So Microsoft was really interesting because that's probably the most recent study that was done by an MNC. There were 2,500 employees, I understand, that went through this program in Japan. And they not only saw that there was a 40% rise in productivity, but there was actually a reduction in the amount of time people were taking to take time off, 25%. And that generally the mood, the energy, and the overall happiness was higher. Plus, there were lower business expenses, something as different as the number of printouts that people were doing in the day. The amount of printouts that they were doing actually went down. So, as you rightly said, there were some implications on climate, the climate control as well. There are many other studies. There was a very interesting study which was done in Sweden with nurses, where they reduced the number of hours that these nurses were doing. And they saw happiness went up, they were healthier, they were more energetic, but the number of jobs that were made available also increased. So there was a employment angle there as well. So it's great to see now, as we're living in this day and age of data and science, that so many of these experiments are beginning to show what intuitively we knew in terms of productivity enhancement and the states of flow that we naturally get into. And now beginning to therefore translate into bottom lines, as you said, for EBITDA and profitability and growth.
So Marcus, I want to begin also, you know, we've got you on the show called Startup Central. It's a show which is dedicated to the new economy, to startups, to young founders, entrepreneurs, technology, all of that. So now these guys who are, starting startups, whether they're 23 years old or restarting life and could be 40 years old, 50 years old, 60 years old, they treat their startup, their business as their newborn, as their baby. They believe they need to be obsessing about it. They need to be on calls 24/7, always have their cell phones, always be on email, all of that. They just don't know how to detach because, like I said, it's like their newborn. From whatever you're saying and whatever we're hearing about as well, that's the wrong way to go about it.
Look, the focus should always be on productivity. It should be, how can I maximize the productive time that I spend in order to achieve the high-fueled, ambitious growth that I'm trying to create value for myself, for my employees, my stakeholders, and beyond. And whatever people can do to enhance that is the tools and the tricks that they need to be focused on. Just because you are arbitrarily connected to your phone 24/7 does not mean that you're making the best decisions all through that particular working day. You might actually find that for you, actually creating an arbitrary end of the day might actually find you in a state of being better refreshed, more energetic, and better able to bring the best that you can to your startup environment the following day or another point in time. In the same vein, for many of the startup founders, we're living in a gig economy. This is platform-led. We're a purpose-led generation, the millennials are. And so we need to ensure that we create the right ecosystem around our most productive and benefit resources, which is our human capital within the organization, so that they can help the organizations thrive and grow over the long run.
That's interesting because you talked about millennial, and I don't know how, but I am supposed to also be a millennial, not giving away my age. But apparently we millennials, and I'm an aberration here, don't like to be married to their jobs. They want to be asset light. They're living life for experiences. It's not always about the money, but what they can take away. And they don't believe in, staying with the same job for 5 years or 6 years. Forget the 10-year phenomenon. So having said that, is that another way founders can actually get loyalty, can get their employees to stay, simply by letting them be more productive, giving them time off?
Absolutely. We all want to be open to gaining these experiences and to live life in its truest wonder. And necessarily being married to our work may not be the way that most millennials or the younger generation think or view their lives and how they want to build their career. That doesn't mean that they're not driven by purpose. If we can align as company founders, as leaders, if we are able to align the vision, the intent, the purpose of our organization with the larger goal, with larger impact, and show to employees and our colleagues that we're able to do so, then we see that you'll have higher levels of attrition, more engaged workforces, more productive in terms of what they're creating in terms of value, and hopefully then lead to larger retention rates and being with the company for longer.
Because a lot of founders remind me of this phrase that we use, helicopter moms. They're always hovering around. And like I said, a startup is like your newborn. So the question I want to ask you is, how can young founders, or even those in managerial positions, not be helicopter moms?
Well, we've got some really helpful Thrive micro steps for people to do that. I think the first thing to understand is of course, self-care. And if you look after yourself, your body, mind, heart, soul, you will see longevity, not only in terms of your own life, of course, but the energy that you can bring into the business, the resilience that you have, and of course, the ability to be more creative and more in tune with your inner sense of wisdom to hopefully then create more productive, more creative products and services for your clients and customers. So if you put yourself first, as Ariana beautifully says, if you put your oxygen mask on before thinking about putting it on for someone else, then you'll see huge dividends playing out over the lifetime of your career.
So it is the start of a new year. We, of course, got you with the trigger of what the Finnish Prime Minister is recommending. Having said that, as we start 2020, as we start the new decade, for all of those tuning in, any ideas, 3 or 4 big ones that they can incorporate in their schedules, make it their New Year resolution to be more productive, to be happier, to also detach?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you three of my favorite micro steps to this. Number one is every morning we all create a to-do list. Let's add an extra column to that and also have a to-be list. So in order for me to do something, what is the state that I need to be in to get the most effective output that I want of those tasks and in the working day? Number two is create an arbitrary end of day. We all know that work will always fill the amount of time available to do so. But we've seen in partly part of this conversation and the data and research which is available that to be your most productive self doesn't mean that you need to be working all the hours that God gives you. So create an end of day and then allow yourself the time physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually to then disconnect and fuel your inner sense, your inner body, whether that's spending time with your kids, your spouse, your friends, your hobbies. Remind yourself why it is that you are on this earth and all the beauty that there is around us. And number three, and it comes down to the digital world that we live in, create a healthier relationship with technology. If that means going onto airplane mode when you're trying to get into a state of flow, when you're trying to type a important email or create an important report, if it means telling your work colleagues that you're not going to be available between this time and this time, so that you can ensure that you get all those tasks done. Recreating the relationship that we have with our mobile phones and technology will greatly enhance our brain's ability to get back into flow in order to be productive and create the most successful output that we want to do in our lives.
In fact, I remember when Ariana Huffington was in India in her last visit, she actually recommended, and she does this very often, is leave your phone in another room and go to sleep. I've never been able to achieve it.
Absolutely. No, we all have Thrive phone beds in the organization. I've got one just here in my living room. And one of the first things that I did on joining the organization and leading the India business was getting to this habit myself. And now my wife and I, we have a rule: no screens allowed in the bedroom at all. We plug our phones to charge so that they can rest and recharge overnight while we rest and recharge overnight as well. It's been a fantastic addition to our work-life routine.
Well, if my bosses are listening, one day I would like to try it out. But Marcus, on a more serious note, in the last couple of years, have you noticed if there is a larger trend of organizations, of founders, entrepreneurs being more open to detachment, more open to leading a more holistic life and wanting the same for their workforce? The reason I'm asking this is because that's your business model as well, right? You hold workshops and all of that.
Absolutely. No, we've been so fortunate in the last 2 years alone. We're now working with something like 30 companies around the country. A lot of the large MNCs rolling this out for their organization, not just the leadership layer, but entire organizations, companies like Microsoft, like American Express, like KPMG, WPP Group, etc. And we're living in this day and age where we're seeing the implications of stress and burnout have huge negative impact on our individual lives and our working lives and business productivity and performance as well. I mean, just looking at the conversations over the last year at Davos, after climate crisis and Brexit, the impact of mental health at work was probably the third or fourth most spoken about topic. The Director General of the World Health Organization, immediately after the last convening, then actually institutionalized and described burnout as an official disease, which has now been classified in the ICD. So that's the International Classification of Disease. And we in India, and so many of your startup founders listening and watching are working in the space of health technology. And we're seeing so much of diabetes, heart disease, hypertension, oncology, mental health disorders, etc. So it's really worrying. I'm a young father. I've got a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. And I keep telling everyone that the single most reason why I do what I do is because I do not want the next generation to be faced with the same challenges that we have. And hopefully if Thrive Global in its own small ways is making that difference, then we're most pleased to be part of that journey.
Marcus, before I let you go, I started the interview with the bold suggestion by the Finnish Prime Minister. I'm going to end with it. There are two sides to every coin, right? So on one side, I'm talking about me, and I'm sure there are many more like me. Yes, I would be more productive at work if I had a 4-day working week. But, if I had 3 days off to myself and I'm not coming to work and I don't have children, for example, I don't have a spouse, I would end up spending a lot of my money. So at least when I'm in my workspace, I'm not spending money, I'm making money. I would go out, I would maybe not spend all of that time what we classify conservatively as productively. Isn't that another, couldn't that be a bad side of this bold suggestion?
I think that's an entire new conversation around GDP growth, productivity for India, etc., and whether there's an ability for people to spend more. But I think the answer to part of what the Finnish Prime Minister was talking about was also allowing people to spend time doing things that they enjoy, which contribute to their well-being, and that need not necessarily come from materialistic or activities which involve spending money. It could be things like pursuing one's hobby, spending time in nature, even having the opportunity to spend more time with our spouses and our loved ones. So I think there's a lot of merit in that, not only from a business perspective, but just from a societal level and creating more good in this world.
And with that, Marcus, thank you so much for joining us here on this edition of Startup Central. Here's wishing you and the entire team at Thrive Global a very happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you all. Thank you. Bye-bye.